Hello, and welcome to the Naftiko Capabilities Podcast. My name is Ken Lane. I'm the Chief Community Officer here at Naftiko, but you might also know me as the API Evangelist, where I've been covering the technology, business, and politics of APIs since 2010. This is our podcast where we talk about APIs and integrations, but always trying to steer things towards the business side of things, governance, compliance, and all those things we need to kind of ground what's going on today. So continuing the conversation around governance, I sat down recently with my friend Rose Missier, who is currently with Xero, but I've did a podcast with her a couple of years ago and talked about API governance and product management and how you produce APIs at the enterprise level. And so I recently sat down with Rose again to check in on how she's seeing things, what's shifted, what's evolved, and of course, how is AI changing how we approach APIs, but more importantly, API governance and the full life cycle and how we deliver APIs. So I sat down with her and asked her, what's she's seeing, how's AI shifted things.
That's where I'm seeing the shift, because I think from what I spoke to you a few years ago, I think the fundamental problem remains where API as a product has never been the focus. And so product and design feel that they are not across what developers do. And I think developers feel that they know the developer experience much better than their product and design counterparts. And so I think that's where today the tooling has helped product and design folks to actually get involved much earlier. And I can tell you from my experience as well, it's now just not in the build or design phase. It starts right from your business case and your PRDs. And I can see that's beginning to shift. So whether that's tooling, so if you're lucky if you've got all the access to all the different tools, but I can see teams are starting to use agents to do their spec reviews, trying to actually write out the specs from an early, from your PRD itself, if you're still writing PRDs. So I can see that there's a massive difference. And so you're shifting left. Governance is not like an afterthought, or governance is not something that happens automated or well understood only by developers. I think the scene is changing.
I like that shifting left that's happening. I like that product alignment with the PRD, but I wanted to learn where Rose is also seeing the friction and the challenges in doing this.
Getting everyone on the same page when it comes to focusing on governance. I'll still say that is a challenge, because I think we're all chasing bigger deadlines. I think we want to be first now. Everybody wants to be AI first. Everybody's looking at options to rewrite everything that we wrote in the last 10 years, which is not leveraging AI at all. So I think what do they call it? The SaaS-portfolio. I think all of us are fearing the worst. So I think the focus is there. Everybody's in this bubble, fearing the worst. And so I don't think they do understand that API quality, APIs really need to be considered even more today in order to work on the vision that all these companies have out there. So I think that's the biggest challenge, to actually try and figure out. Yes, it's APIs, so I think they get that. But I think we need to build APIs faster, and faster doesn't necessarily mean we are building it the right way, and getting Devin and every other AI companion to do the work isn't safe too. So I think that's the challenge today, because I think senior stakeholders feel that tools can do it all. And so that's risky.
I agree. I'm seeing this play out quite a bit, where folks put a lot of faith in the tools and the rules, and that's just going to govern and make everything work. And so this makes the promises of vendors even more potent and powerful, and changing how things work, but not always following through and delivering on what's needed. And so I wanted to understand from Rose, like, where's the tools in our SaaS portfolio fit into this? How does it impact how successful we are when it comes to governance?
I think it's completely imbalanced. It's skyrocketed because fundamental problem right now is, I would say, go steps back. API discoverability, because we're going to have a lot of shadow APIs. We're going to have APIs that are just going to be created, I don't know, by the day in millions. So, and we're going to have apps out in various different ecosystem marketplaces, like exploding too. So, and with the SaaS apocalypse, I think everybody is going to panic and go into a mode where we're going to see an explosion of APIs. And so I think that's the fundamental problem now, if you ask me. It's API discoverability.
API discovery is super important. It's the number one problem when it comes to governance, but also every other aspect of the life cycle. And definitely agree that it's it's an area that we're going to need to find solutions for. And I don't think it's the historic solutions that people think they are when it comes to search and catalogs and that marketplaces. But we'll see. So I have opinions around discovery. I think context engineering is a piece of that. How do you carve things up and make it accessible? And I wanted to get Rose's view on the role that context engineering plays when it comes to this.
And that totally depends on how much you fed it. So by the sounds of it, you've given it a lot. But if I were to just give very basic information and limited information, I'm going to get the quality back, right? So I think that's probably where product design, engineering, IT, business, I think those fundamentals need to be strong. And I don't think everybody's there yet to understand how context matters, how prompts work, what info should I give, how should I give that. The structure matters today. I think we've gone are the days when we're talking about docs. Now we're talking about agents, where we're talking about skills. It needs a lot of structure. So I think our skills are changing. So we've got to give us some time for all folks who haven't been close to MCPs, A2A, everything else, to actually get on board and try and understand how things work. And so I think until that time, we probably might still need a human in the loop to take and not do a lot of clouding. So we'll see how it goes. Yeah.
People are everything, but come on, we got to be clotting to make all this work, right? I kid, but the people part is interesting because the organizational structure, the human in loop, really is dependent on how orgs are structured, how orgs are resourced, how they communicate and work together. And so I wanted to understand more about how Rose sees the human in the loop and how that's going to work, but how does that work across when things are centralized or things are more mandated to be, platformatized, or are they just organic and federated and people are distributed around the globe? How does that work when it comes to trying to make this governance happen?
I'd say that there are still, depending on who you work with. So I think the fintech and the banks can still be caught up in a centralized model. And so I think it's still seen, I'll put it this way, I think governance is still seen as like almost some sort of red tapeism. And I think that's the mentality and the sentiment that has to change. And so I don't think we'll get away from the centralized system, at least in certain industries. I think that'll still continue to exist because it's more of a mindset shift. That's always been a problem. And I've always been caught for using the word governance, whether it's in a centralized model or a federated model. I think that is fundamentally also wrong because I think we are starting to blur the definitions between guidance and governance. We're not there yet. If we are matured, yes, we can talk about guidance. But I think the federated model kind of changes things. So from my experience, I can see we started off with a centralized model. And so getting stakeholders to buy into this concept is a big challenge. They do not see value in it at all. Standards are there. I think they wait for the very last where API security comes in only once everything is done or everything goes wrong. And so I think it's very reactive, and that's when they think about there's value in looking at governance. And then comes the centralized concept, because they feel that they are best placed to actually run this whole system. And I don't think that works. That's like you're in your like age old days where everything runs from one single group or one single person, and that is a big bottleneck, especially at the speed that we are all operating today. What we work on today is not the same tomorrow. So it's a bit contradictory, because when you talk about centralized model and the era that we are in, they're not hand in glove.
So many alignment issues to worry about. So I asked Rose, what's the role of AI? What's it going to do when it comes to bridging these divides? Starting with engineering and product, but all the other ones that exist out there.
I think it comes down to how we want to embrace the differences in the times that we are in. So definitely in the past and right now, product and engineering will never align. So to your point where you felt, is it that product don't understand the language, do engineers don't, that problem still remains, but that's a strength. And partially the problem is one segment keeping the other segment out isn't going to work. We need to embrace those differences, because that's exactly where all these problems that we've been talking about could be solved. And so then the tooling is not going to amplify the problem, but it's going to amplify the speed in which we are able to actually simplify governance. Right. So I think that's where I see all the traditional problems still being a problem. It's still going to be run, because also all different roles are becoming a little bit blurry today because of AI. So tomorrow, I'm already doing it. I'm already have agents just going and checking the open API spec and then trying to tell me about what I'm missing. So I may not even rely on an engineer. An engineer might say the same thing. I do not need a PM to be actually writing, but I don't think that's that. The AI still needs a lot of thinking. It doesn't have a brain. It just works on what we write, the context we provide. And so I think the human in the loop is still needed. So the differences between product and engineering still needs to be resolved. There will be an overlap. There will be differences. We just need to understand how to work together. And then the tools becomes, I don't think it's a bottleneck. It's just that we need to work along, as I mentioned, with our new governance copilot. I think that's where the change would be. And so these tools can fit into different parts of the API lifecycle and the development.
Agreed. This is what I'm investing in and betting on at Naftiko, and what we're building is that that you're gonna have that governance co-pilot along for the ride all along the way when you're integrating, whether you produce or you're consuming someone else's APIs. You have that along with you. But I feel pretty strongly that a spec-driven approach is how we're going to kind of keep this aligned and inform and keep it as deterministic and non-deterministic, kind of helping ships move forward, teams move forward. And so I wanted to get Rose's view on how she sees spec-driven development influencing these outcomes.
I think elimination of negotiation is never going to happen, but I think the intent is we need to shift far left. I think we're somewhere still caught between the middle and governance to the right. And you're right, governance can mean different things. But I think where I feel the shift should happen, and where I think PRDs come into play, is it all starts with the thinking around API being a product. Right. And you do not have to be building public APIs. You do not have to be like a API company like Spotify or anybody. But I think everything is fundamentally APIs today. AI cannot exist. Behind the scenes, you need APIs. So I think every company today is going to be an API company. But I don't think people who are actually, whether they write PRDs or whether they're flat, they go just straight into building. I think there needs to be some thought put into whether they are building APIs and who they are building APIs for, who's consuming these APIs, because it's no longer systems and humans, but it's probably going to be agents, and we don't know what else. So I think that education needs to happen. And I must say, sometimes product folks are not confident. They always say that developer counterparts know better, but I think that's fundamentally the problem. We do know something that our engineering counterparts do not know, and engineers do know something that product folks don't know. And AI systems do not know to think. So that way, product and engineering will never have issues, because we do know that each of us have our own brains. Correct. So I think there's a little bit of an evolution happening there. So the governance where you're talking at the early days, where you're still figuring out what to do, whether you're writing APIs, I don't know whether it'll go to an extent where you'll get designers who are still looking at more from a UI experience. Probably they might be looking at an agentic experience. Whether they would go down to an extent of thinking about async APIs, open APIs, I do not know. But I can see that because with our PRD templates, we are able to actually help them write in, say, very plain, simple language as to what exactly do you want to get out of this outcome. So what information are you sending? What information are you getting? So I think it's spinning a little bit until they get to a point where they are comfortable understanding what these different specs and formats are, and they're not far away. And I think that's where the tools are helping. So the gap will be bridged very quickly between product design and engineering, simply because everybody's starting to think much earlier, and primarily because we've got so many LLMs and agents doing the work for us.
Yeah, I think the spec-driven, that core of it is what Rose is talking about. That gets refined and iterated upon, but it's equal parts human and automation and agentic, I guess, and if you want to say it that way. So I think that those artifacts and those specs that we're iterating on, collaborating, that's what's it's capturing that as we move forward and head in the right direction. So governance is interesting. It's I would say the going from design first to spec driven, keeping the product alignment, business alignment, keeping the governance and rules and the guardrails in there. I like the way Rose describes how we've kind of evolved or moved forward with governance, but and product management, but how it's kind of collided with AI, and I'm hopeful that we can get down to our senses when it comes to how it works when it comes to artifacting and what aspects of code is, but that human in the loop that she talks about is super critical. So I'm hopeful. We'll see. This is what I'm investing in, so that's why I'm talking to folks like Rose. All right. Well, I appreciate Rose coming by. I appreciate y'all tuning in. And until next time, thanks.